a devoted fan, and a plugged-in reporter. There is no better way to talk about hoops than that. Mia O'Brien and Mitch Northam have you covered for the W, the NCAA, Unrivaled, and anything else that involves a ball and a backboard. This is the Women's Basketball Podcast.
Welcome to the Women's Basketball Podcast, as well as my third favorite studio in the world at Tom Bush Mazda dealer off Atlantic Boulevard in Jacksonville, FLA. Mia O'Brien alongside USA Today's Mitchell Northam. Come on, the Final Four is upon us. Mitch has a flight to Phoenix tomorrow morning he's got to catch, which will be around the time that this podcast posts in your feed at OG Triangle Media. And we're excited to talk about, for just the fifth time, should I use the word just, Mitch? For the fifth time, we have all one seeds in the women's basketball tournament Final Four. It will be UCLA and Texas in the nightcap on Friday in Phoenix, South Carolina and UConn, the number one overall seed in the 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tip-off. First things first, Mitch, how are you? Have you slept? Because, we did say last week we're not going to sleep till May, and judging by the fact that your young daughter kept you up half the night, I really think you are taking that to a whole new level.
We sleep in May, or in 2027. I don't know. It's been a fun weekend. Excited to get to Phoenix. It is also the first time since 1996, and just the second time ever that we have had the same four teams in back-to-back Final Fours. So that Final Four in 1996 was held in Charlotte. The first time it's ever been played in North Carolina. That was a Final Four with Pat Summitt's Tennessee and Georgia's Andy Landers and Gino Auriemma back when he had just one ring. And the other team was Stanford, not coached by Tara Vanderveer that year because she was taking the year off to focus on the Olympic team.
Interesting. I did not know that. We're getting a history lesson as we record on Tuesday, March 31st, around 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I preface that and say that because Mitch, of course, is also working the coaching carousel in women's college basketball. And so, hey, if some news pops off before we hear from you guys in the morning, just know this is all updated as of 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday, March 31st. And again, Mitch flies out to Phoenix tomorrow. Really excited to hear his boots on the ground reports, not just here at the Women's Basketball Podcast, but also over at USA Today. Let us keep it moving. They're running it back just like they did last year with the same four. And we are running it back with this week's starting five, where we begin each and every episode of the Women's Basketball Podcast. So let's begin with this, Mitch. Well, yes, we're going to talk about all four of the remaining teams, all one seeds in this tournament bracket. I want to start with those two that throughout the course of the season we have said it feels like UConn, UCLA collision course operating in their own stratosphere. But tell me this, do you feel that both the Bruins and the Huskies have actually looked as dominant throughout the course of this tournament as you expected?
UConn, yes. And just, simply like the Notre Dame game, like the Irish kind of kept it close for a little bit there. And then Blanca Quinones did her thing off the bench and 20 points and 8 rebounds and 3 assists and has kind of emerged
ever by a UConn player off the bench. Quick side.
Yeah, has kind of emerged as sort of the third banana to, Sarah Strong and AZ Fudd there. I don't know if we want to call her the Alfred to their Batman and Robin.
I like that. Let's roll with that. I like that.
Or something like that. But, that was like an off game for AZ Fudd. She was just 5 of 12 from the floor. But then you have Blanca step up and then Sarah Strong to Sarah Strong things. They've been as advertised. I thought that North Carolina gave them some real problems in the first half of that game. And then they just pulled away and looked like UConn again. UConn has done everything that we've expected them to do. UCLA, I am surprised in a good way from their result against Duke. I think you and I have talked on this podcast about sometimes their inability to meet the moment, and sometimes Corey Close's in-game coaching and adjustments, and sometimes Lauren Betts not, stepping up and playing like one of the best players in the country when she needs to. And I thought against Duke, I thought that game was over. When Duke went up double digits in the first half, I was like, oh, they're going to put their foot on their necks, and like this is going to be it. Like Duke is going to break the cycle of all 4 number 1 seeds making the Final Four. And then in the second half, we got UCLA making adjustments. They mixed in some zone defense. Lauren Betts really put the team on her back, and I think it was a moment where UCLA, who has been a really good 3-point shooting team this year but was not on Sunday, they just decided, hey, we have a 6'7" center and we can pound people in the paint, especially a Duke team where they're playing basically this front line of Toby Fournier and Ari Roberson of 6'2" and 6'3", and one's a sophomore, one's a redshirt freshman. And again, we have a 6'7" senior that's going to be a top 3 pick in the WNBA draft, and we will just hammer the paint. And I thought their defense was really good. I thought Kiki Rice, especially on defense. I mean, Ashlyn Jackson, 0 of 8 from the floor after, saving their seasons against LSU in the previous game. So UCLA, I was just really impressed with. Like, they finally faced some adversity and got through it. And then they won by double digits after being down by double figures to Duke. So that was a performance that I was really kind of impressed with and kind of surprised by, frankly.
So for me, 2 big takeaways with UCLA, and I have been right there with you. The folks who are listening to this, who listen to ESPN radio, know all too well that the mental game has been my question mark, both in terms of the X's and O's, but also
we've called Corey Close the James Franklin of women's college basketball because of her inability to kind of win in these moments. And now she got it done.
And it's not just her. It's also those 2 supposed Batman and Robins in Betts and Kiki Rice, who have been the face of this program for the last 4 years. And that's where I have had questions about both of those players, let alone their head coach in the biggest of moments. It's not a knock on Corey Close's coaching prowess or Lauren Betts's future lottery status, because she's going to be a top 3 pick, as you alluded to, in this upcoming WNBA draft. But ultimately, when the going gets tough, I have still not had this signature moment in my mind of, okay, that's Lauren Betts. She's a dog. She's an alpha. So that's where, when you look at the box score, 2 things stand out for me. Number 1, the reason this UCLA team, unlike last year's, has the potential to go to the national championship game, has the potential to knock off UConn or South Carolina, is because of their depth in the front court. While, yes, we did not see much Sienna Betts, Angela I'm going to butcher her name. Dugalic.
Yeah.
Angela Dugalic gives them a different look at the forward position that they do not have otherwise. And it also frees up Lauren Betts a whole heck of a lot at the 5. So that's number 1. And I think the box score certainly reflects that. In case you didn't see this game, you see, Dugalic with 15 points. You see Lauren Betts with 23. No one else had more than 9. And you look at that and you say, oh, okay, they just pounded them in the paint. It's as simple as that. And that's why they beat Duke. But it's not, because ultimately, and I texted you in the moment, Mitch, Gianna Neepkins, the transfer from Utah, Charlize Ledger-Walker, another transfer to this UCLA program by way of Wazoo. Those 2 finished with a combined 12 points, but it might be 12 of the most important points in a 70-58 win over Duke.
Yep.
And I think you could say the same throughout the course of this postseason run for the Bruins. I think that those 2 are the X factors because they make such winning plays on both ends of the floor. And ultimately, they both have that alpha personality. And like I said it to Kevin, and not just because Neepkins is a friend of Game Night on ESPN Radio and a friend of the Women's Selection Sunday show. We had fun with Gianna having her on the program, but she shoots 90+% from the free throw line.
Yeah.
She's been top 3 all season in that metric. And I don't want to say that free throw percentage relates directly to whether you're an alpha or not, or whether you're mentally tough or not, but in a way it does. And I think that those 2 in particular are really where I say, all right, combined with the added depth in the front court, that is where UCLA, in my opinion, has the ability to potentially finally get over the hump.
Yeah, Neepkins is a 50-40-90 player this season, and we don't see that a lot in women's college basketball. It's pretty rare. This year we have her and Britt Prince from Nebraska both doing it. Obviously Nebraska season's over, but nonetheless, yeah, Neepkins, I think I texted you this, like, she is a senior veteran, fifth-year senior, played at Utah, all the things. She is not afraid of the moment, and she's not afraid of the big shot. And while UCLA as a whole did not shoot well from three in that game against Duke, the one that she hit in, I think it was the third quarter, I think kind of swung momentum in UCLA's favor, because it was, both of these teams really struggled from 3-point shooting range. Maybe Gino Auriemma is right about the rims and the balls and all the things.
I think Michigan would agree with you, Gino, but you didn't hear that from me.
Yeah. And Charlize Legger Walker is another, fifth or sixth-year senior. I can't remember at this point, but played at Washington State, was on that Pac-12 title team that they had 6 assists in this one. A lot of them to Lauren Betts in the paint. So, UCLA was the team I think that I was maybe most impressed by, but I will say that Texas was a close second.
We are going to get to the Longhorns here momentarily in today's starting five. But just to recap, UCLA's road to the Final Four. They defeated Cal Baptist 96-43, Oklahoma State 87-68, Minnesota 80-56. Again, all three of those were largely never in doubt. And then Duke, their final opponent in the Elite Eight, a 70-58 win. As for UConn, as we alluded to, outside of maybe a scare from North Carolina and Notre Dame in the first half, they have steamrolled 90-52 over UTSA. Of course, the 31-0 run against Syracuse, a 98-45 final that will live in infamy forever. I don't care how well Jerry McNamara does with the men's team. We will always have
personal attack on Felicia Legette-Jack.
I'm sorry, Syracuse fans. I know a bunch of you and a bunch of my family and friends who are Syracuse fans and employees listen to this pod. North Carolina, 63-42 winner. UConn, Notre Dame, 70-52. That is the margin of victory for the Huskies in the Elite Eight. Let us keep it moving. Before we get to Texas and South Carolina, because I'm going to save that for the end of today's starting five, just kind of put a little bow and set the stage for what's to come in Phoenix this week.
Sure.
I do want to... Here we go again, Mitch. At number 2, formally apologize to the players, the coaches, and the fan bases of the University of Notre Dame and Duke University. We were wrong. We wrote you off. You didn't write back. Hannah Hidalgo did what everyone who's a fan of the Fighting Irish said she would do. And me, of course, the diehard Caitlin Clark, Iowa fan on this podcast, said, no, there's no way that with a rotation of 7 players, you could have this one player who can realistically carry you all the way to the Elite Eight. That is exactly what happened. They gave UConn a scare because of Hannah Hidalgo's play in the Elite Eight. And Duke, meanwhile, knocks off LSU that I had everybody in Bristol telling me, everyone's sleeping on LSU. They averaged 90 some odd points. They've scored over 100. How many times?
I believe in you, Duke.
And so Mitch did come to that side of the aisle a little bit earlier than me. And so Kara Lawson, I applaud you. Continue to do hard better. Again, I've become friendly, or at the very least, I've had them on the shows. And I've become more appreciative of some of the girls on the Duke roster. Shout out to Ariana. Shout out to Delaney Thomas, who also joined us on ESPN Radio. And so I've grown to appreciate you. But also the results were there in the second half of the year that, yes, we questioned your prowess early on, as well as the roster construction itself. And that's where I do want to especially give Niele Ivey and Kara Lawson their flowers. Kara more so because she made those adjustments. Niele, I think it was just kind of circle peg, square hole, but we're going to just morph that thing until it is a square, and now it's going to fit into the hole perfectly.
Yeah, I think on the Notre Dame front, I was wrong about Notre Dame. All season long, going back to last spring, I was questioning the makeup of this roster construction. And I think those were fair criticisms. And there was a point in time this season where Notre Dame, I think they lost 6 of 9 in one stretch. Maybe that was in like January. And, they lost a game at Georgia Tech. They lost to Clemson. We were kind of wondering, like, is this Notre Dame team going to make the NCAA tournament? Turns out they righted the ship. They got things going in February, got things going in March. And not only did they make the NCAA tournament, but they upset Ohio State on their home floor. They beat Vanderbilt, led by Michaela Blakes, in the jersey guard battle there. And they get to the Elite Eight for the first time in Nia Ivy's tenure. And so I think two things. One, as much as we compliment and talk about Hannah Hidalgo, I think she's kind of underrated at this point. Like, I just like to do what she did against Vanderbilt and to do what she did against Ohio State and to literally drag this team. Now, Notre Dame has had some supporting cast members step up lately, but for the most part, to drag this team to the Elite Eight is incredible. Like, there's no one else on this roster is an all-conference player. And
I got a kick out of, by the way, just take you behind the curtain. So
Yeah.
we had a Generation W Upshot League event on Friday. Shout out to our friend Don Orender, the former commissioner of the W, who I also may or may not be texting right now, trying to set up a call for later. But so if you see me, that's what I'm doing. But we were behind the stage, myself and a bunch of the Upshot League coaches, and they all said it. They were like, if you don't appreciate what Hannah is doing. And that's where I bring the Caitlin Clark into it. And certainly they flashed the graphic multiple times with regards to triple doubles. But we were watching the upset win over Vanderbilt, where, of course, Hannah dropped 31 points, 11 boards, 7 assists, 10 steals. That is something that Caitlin was not doing. Like, that is something we have not seen a player at the rate in which Hannah Hidalgo plays defense and it translates to offense. And to your point, I got a kick out of somebody made a comment about, like, ooh, I'm wondering, do you think that, Ayana Moore might be a WNBA draft prospect? Like, where do you think she'll go? And I legit was just like, do you hear yourselves talking? Like, and listen, they know more ball than me. So shout out to the Upshot League.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, this team is one player. It's literally one player. And
I mean, maybe Cass Prosper gets a look next year, but yeah.
Right. But this is one player, one coach, Mitch. They hedged their bet. And it worked. And the same, of course, can be said for Kara, who, again, retooled that roster after proclaiming she had the best freshman point guard she'd ever coached, Emily Skinner. She takes the red shirt. They retool that roster, and they're going to bring a lot of those pieces back, just like I would expect Notre Dame to do, although hopefully they do a little bit of work in the portal as well. And, of course, they have Addie Bajorn coming in, which is also a mess. Right, no, Addie's going to Texas. Who do they have coming in? Notre Dame has a couple top 20 players that we'll see in the McDonald's All-American game. They have a couple top 20 players coming in.
The Notre Dame thing. I think I heard maybe it was Gino compared Hannah Hidalgo to Lawrence Taylor, which I think is a like perfect analogy, because like they are these two singular talents that can just completely disrupt what an opposing offense is doing in their respective sports. So I love that comparison. Nia Ivy. I mean, she bet on herself here, and she won. Like, I am not going to question Nia Ivy's coaching for a while, until she does something egregious at some point next season. But like, this was a successful season for Notre Dame, like, full stop. And then on Duke, I will say, I voted for Kara Lawson for, and put her on like my ballot for, I think you're allowed to vote for 3 coaches and some of the Coach of the Year awards from the Naismith or whatever. I put her on my ballot because, the reason that Duke kind of had its turnaround was because of decisions that she made. Like, it was coaching in real time. They started out 3-6. They had an injury. They had to put, basically, like, I've talked to so many people who are like, before they put Riley Nelson in the starting lineup, they were basically playing 4-on-5 because Jaden Donovan cannot shoot whatsoever. Jaden Donovan is a great defensive player, but like, if you go back and watch the game from Baylor, I think Nikki Collin even said this at her press conference, like, they did not guard Jaden Donovan. Like, they were just playing 4-on-5 essentially. And, Kara Lawson made that switch. They put Riley Nelson on the floor. Then Jane Donovan gets hurt, so then she didn't have a choice going on from there anyways after the South Dakota State game. They go on this run where they win 17 in a row. They win another ACC title, and they make an Elite Eight. And in the process, they avenge the losses to Baylor and LSU. And Kara has some work to do in the portal, I think. because she is losing Taina Mayer, who was kind of the bus driver of this team this year, and Ashlyn Jackson is another big loss. And so you're going to get Emily Skinner healthy. They do have some solid freshman players coming in, but I think Kara is going to want to bring in another like veteran guard. Just going to throw this out there, pure speculation, like maybe a Jada Williams from Iowa State.
We're going to talk about them in last call. Yes. Well done, Mitch.
Just an idea. Just an idea.
Throwing that out there. Throwing that out there.
So, yeah.
Let's keep it moving. Another requiem, briefly, in number 3 in this week's starting 5. Another team that did fall in the Elite 8, but we want to give them their flowers. That is the TCU Horned Frogs. Final score, South Carolina 78, TCU 52. That final score not indicative of how back and forth this game was until the fourth quarter, in which the Gamecocks finally pulled away on the back of a player that I don't know if everyone like realized that Agat McKeer could do what she did on Monday night against this TCU side. We're going to talk about South Carolina. Don't worry, Gamecock fans, we're going to get to you. But I do want to give Olivia Miles also her flowers, the former Notre Dame star who bet on herself as well to stay in college for an extra year because she still felt there was room for her to grow. I think she also didn't want to finish her college career on the sour note that was Notre Dame's Sweet 16 exit from a season ago, with all the drama and the speculation surrounding Miles' exit. But Olivia Miles finishes this game with 18 points, 6 assists, 3 boards. Again, part of it was the early foul trouble. She had 2 fouls in the opening 5 minutes. But after what she and Marta Suarez did in their Sweet 16 victory, in which they had a hand in every single point in TCU's win over Virginia, like that, for me, I just want to credit Mark Campbell, another person who many questioned, but he was right. He hit with Haley Van Lith last year. He hit with Olivia Miles and friends this year. Additionally, we also need to acknowledge, Mitch, that this is a TCU program that 26 months ago had to have open tryouts. They had to go to the student union and find replacement players because of the injuries that decimated their roster. And now here they are, back-to-back Elite Eights, just one final step away from a Final Four, a place they have never been in program history.
Yeah, TCU, we know what they've done in the last 2 years in the transfer portal. Year one, going out and getting Sidonia Prince and Haley Van Lith, and who was the other shooter that they had? Madison Connor. And then this year, Olivia Miles, Marta Suarez, Clara Silva, really piecing together this team again. They're going to have to do that again because I just went on ESPN Hoop Girls for the 2026 recruiting rankings, and TCU does not have a top 100 prospect coming in. So they are about to hit the portal again hard. But
Mark Campbell prides himself in that. He's the transfer coach now.
He's the portal king. And so I should have corrected myself because Jada Williams, she's not going to go to Duke. She's going to go to TCU because she's right now the best point guard available in the portal. And each of the past 2 years, that person has gone to TCU to play for Mark Campbell.
He's not just the portal king. He told me on ESPN radio. Mark Campbell straight up said, "I'm the point guard transfer guy." Like that's what I do.
The point guard whisperer. You know who else Mark Campbell could get? And this is really what I'm rooting for. The product.
Oh, the drama that would ensue. Because here's the thing, like Haley Van Lith came in with some baggage. Olivia Miles came in with some baggage. And outside of a storyline here or there from one of the pundits like us, there really was no drama in Fort Worth. No. By all accounts. With both players.
And also, I know we like to make fun of the product, but really,
Miller, for those of you who don't know,
after a turbulent freshman season at Rutgers, pretty quiet in terms of like drama this year at Penn State.
Well, Penn State also didn't have much to talk
about.
No,
in general, totally. But. Yeah, they were not a good team, but yeah. I would be interested in that. Addie Brown also available. Taryn Barbeau. There's some good players already who have said, "Hey, we're transferring. We're in the portal." Also, this is not related to TCU at all, but a fan of ours on this program, Lena Girardi, has announced that she's going to transfer.
There's like 7 players from Oklahoma State that are transferring. Maybe Mark Campbell gets them to stay in the Big 12. Perhaps there's a lot of shooters on that list.
Possibly.
So,
Yeah.
well,
But TCU, I expect them to, they're going to reload in the portal, and they're going to be really good again next year, and they're going to be in the mix to win the Big 12, and they're going to be in the mix to make it to the second weekend of the tournament, and we'll see what kind of roster they put together again.
Two more teams to both hold a funeral for, but also look ahead. Both, well, I shouldn't say both. One will look vastly different, in my opinion, comparatively to what they did in 2025, 2026, that being Kim Mulkey's LSU Tigers. The quotes from Kim flowing after the last second loss to Duke were incredible in that post-game press conference, in which she said she's going out, she's hiring 2 assistant coaches to replace the 2 that went to Rutgers, aka
Has already done
LSU.
interviews, by the way.
Already done interviews. She's also hitting the portal. So get ready. She's going to find her Flau'jae Johnson replacement if she doesn't come via traditional high school recruiting. And then Vanderbilt, who's a team that's going to look eerily similar, I would think, barring any sort of transfer portal additions or subtractions. And so my question for you, Mitch, at number 4 in this week's starting 4, who are you buying more heading into next season after a disappointing Sweet 16 loss, Vanderbilt or LSU?
I think there's more questions about LSU. Like Vanderbilt, there are things like we know about them. Like they have a great coach in Shea Ralph. They have the SEC Player of the Year, the nation's leading scorer, Michaela Blakes, who was only a sophomore, and then they have the SEC Freshman of the Year in Aubrey Galvin. I think for Vanderbilt, it's like can you add a piece here or there to kind of bolster that roster? I think what they really need is a post presence. Just someone who is a threat down low to kind of open things up for Blakes and Galvin a little bit. So I'm curious to see kind of, who they might go after in the portal. I'm not entirely sure what their, incoming recruiting class looks like, but if I were Shea Ralph, I would be trying to target some sort of post presence in the portal.
So real quick before we then circle to LSU, see, I go the other way with it. I do agree they need a post presence.
Mm-hmm.
I think they need a Neepkins or Ledger Walker because
the shooter,
because the 67-64 loss. Do you think it's to Notre Dame in the Sweet 16? Do you think it's going to be remembered more? I think it will be remembered in hindsight more for what Hannah Hidalgo did, or will it be remembered for what Michaela Blakes didn't do in the final seconds? That's my thing. And again, I don't want to try to say Michaela Blakes, Kiki Rice, Spider-Man meme. In the biggest of moments, they faltered, especially after Vanderbilt's one-and-done performance in the SEC tournament, because for the Commodores, this was their first trip to the Sweet 16 since 2009. That's uncharted territory. What was Michaela Blakes in 2009? What, like 5 years old, 4 years old? And so I don't want to put this squarely on the shoulders of the nation's leading scorer, but there are going to be questions if Vanderbilt doesn't advance to the Sweet 16 Elite 8 next year, Mitch, because they need, whether it's that glue, if that's what you want to call Neepkins at UCLA, whether you want to call it the dog, that's Ledger Walker with that veteran postseason experience, like that for me is what they're missing. I did love Aubrey Galvin going up against her home state school in Illinois in the round of 32. She's got the moxie. She's got the swag. I don't know if it was just because she was going against the player who stole Illinois State Player of the Year from her, but I saw more fire there and I saw less questioning and less nerves because the first half of that Notre Dame game, it looked like Vanderbilt was playing scared.
Yeah, I'm now looking at you made me click on the box score for Notre Dame Vanderbilt, and I'm now looking at this for the first time. 7 of 26 for Michaela Blakes, 0 of 5 from 3-point land. I did not realize that was how that poorly that she shot. But to I think to our point, Galvin and Michaela Blakes combined for 50 of their 64 points. So I think whether it's a post presence or whether it's a shooter, I think you need a third option here. And I don't think a consistent third option ever really rose to the occasion for Vanderbilt this year. Like sometimes it was Justine Passat, sometimes it was Wenatanda, sometimes it was Sasha Washington. But for the most part, it was Blakes and Galvin, powering this team to,
which is fine
as far as they went. Yeah.
But you need because look at where Kiki Rice and Lauren Betts have gotten UCLA up to this point.
Sure.
Or rather up to the point of their sophomore when they were both sophomores. So now we have Galvin's a freshman and Michaela Blakes is a sophomore. It's kind of at an eerily similar point. And so I don't want to see Shea Ralph make the mistake that Corey Close did where they said, we're fine, we're running it back. And you make it to a Final Four last year in their junior season. But there needs to be that dog. And like I said, I was watching this game with the Upshot League coaches, and they all said, look, Lauren Betts is the most impactful player in the country. Sarah Strong's the best player in the country. But Hannah Hidalgo is the greatest competitor, and ultimately that trumps the greatest scorer in Michaela Blake's in college basketball in 2025, 2026.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
As for LSU, yeah, I know it's tough to really evaluate that roster given we haven't seen an LSU roster without Flau'jae Johnson in over 4 seasons. But I do want to also acknowledge the viral moment that occurred in this game that a lot of folks were talking about, where Jada Richard basically waved off Michaela Williams. The streets were not very happy on X with that one, Mitch. Jada Richard, I would think she's coming back next year. So who's going to be the bus driver for LSU with no Flau'jae?
I think you're going to see probably at least one significant LSU player transfer to Rutgers with Gary Reedus. Now, maybe that player is Jada Richard. Maybe it's somebody like Bella Hines.
Maybe it's Michaela Williams, Mylasia Fulwiley. Maybe, possibly.
I think Fulwiley is staying put, and I think she kind of showed in this Duke game. I mean, she was the best player on the floor for LSU.
Statement, by the way.
She was the one that kept them in this game. I mean, Duke could not really stop her. Excuse me. I was listening to Debbie Antonelli and Beth Mallon's call this game, and Debbie just kept talking about like they couldn't stop Mylasia off the bounce. Like they just couldn't. She was just too athletic almost. Like Duke didn't really have a person to stop her in transition or when she really got things cooking in the half court. And so, Mylasia Fulwiley is going to be a senior next year. I imagine that there's probably a conversation of like, look, I came off the bench this year. Like I came off the bench my entire career. I'm ready to start. Like I imagine that conversation is happening between her and Kim Mulkey at some point. And I imagine that she'll get that starting role and you'll see a backcourt with her and Michaela Williams. The rest of the roster, we'll see. I'm not sure. I think that, Kim Mulkey defiantly rebuffed any thought that she might be retiring in this post-game press conference. There was like some fake account or whatever who said that she was going to retire. And then so the question was asked and, it was a resounding no, I am not retiring. I was told last week that, LSU was already interviewing candidates for those 2 open assistant coaching spots that they have. I think it's a possibility that you might see a former Tennessee Lady Vols assistant coach end up there.
File that away.
And I think it's a possibility.
One that left on his own terms, to be fair. It was not a fire.
Potentially. And I think it's a possibility that if that happens, maybe that assistant coach brings a recruit with him. And maybe that is a bolster to LSU's roster. And so I think LSU is going to do some work in the portal. I think they will probably pursue another post player, not only because Amaya Joyner is out of eligibility, but because I think they were a little disappointed in the production they got from Kate Koval this year.
Yep.
And so, they're going to go after another post. Posts are going to be at a premium this year in the portal, I think. And so, I have more questions about what LSU looks like than Vanderbilt.
Should be noted that of the 85 points that LSU scored against Duke, all but 22 of them came courtesy of that trio of guards. Flau'jae Johnson with 13, Michaela Williams with 22, and Mylasia Fulwiley with a game-high 28. Let's keep it moving and round out this week's starting 5 by looking ahead to the Final Four. Producer Dimitri's not with us today. He's on vacation touring colleges with his daughter, and I know he's looking at the clock and he's saying, hey, let's get to it. Let's talk about what Mitch is most excited for besides the tacos in the Scottsdale area and the resort you're going to be staying at for this week in Phoenix. What are you most excited for on the hardwood between these 4 teams, UCLA, Texas, South Carolina, and UConn?
When the bracket was unveiled, I thought to myself, okay, if we go chalk here and all number 1 seeds make it to the Final Four. These are the matchups that I want in the national semifinals. I want to see South Carolina and UConn because, as I wrote in the predictions that we did at USA Today, I picked South Carolina to win. And I'll give you a couple reasons why. If you look at, you go on the Her Hoop stats page and you look at the statistics. Also, if you just listen to Gino Auriemma talk this year, two of kind of the areas of concern for UConn while they're undefeated have been rebounding and three-point defense. And South Carolina is a good three-point shooting team this year, and they're one of the best rebounding teams in the country. And I also just think, like, having been around South Carolina a little bit, over the past 4 years and having been around Raven Johnson, there is not going to be a player at the Final Four more motivated than Raven Johnson to go out and finish her South Carolina career on a high note. And, she's now playing in her fourth straight Final Four, which is pretty remarkable. And I think this is going to be like a legacy cementing game for her as one of the all-time Gamecock greats. And I think that South Carolina is going to be able to get it done. But I'm really excited to see the matchup. Just excited to see kind of what all that looks like. The other game, Texas and UCLA, this is a run-it-back game, right? Texas beat UCLA, the only team to beat the Bruins in the regular season, on a neutral court in Las Vegas earlier this year. Texas, I just wanted to say, I was wrong about Texas.
We're apologizing to you too, Horns. Don't worry. Sarah Graves. We love Sarah Graves, our favorite walk-on in America. When
the bracket came out, that was the team, the number one seed that I was like the most worried about. That I was like, they got Louisville here, they got Michigan, they got Kentucky. I was really high on Kentucky, as everybody knows.
Just to give Michigan their flowers, because that was my upset surprise pick in the Final Four, and yours was Kentucky. I do want to note that in this game, Texas did have a stretch where they were 4 of 25 in Monday night's Elite 8 matchup. And that's a moment in time where you, me, anyone who roots for the Wolverines or the Wildcats would say, okay, Kentucky, Michigan, it's time to take advantage of that. Because they had a similar lull against the Wildcats as well, if I'm not mistaken. And neither of those teams could take advantage because, as we know, and as we've heard time and time again, Vic Schaefer's teams are defense first. And so even if they can't get it done on the offensive end, if they're taking care of it, they're taking care of the ball on defense, then it doesn't matter because you're not going to be able to get a shot and take advantage of that situation.
So I think the key for Texas, because I've seen this 3 times this month now, is, in the SEC title game against South Carolina, in the Sweet 16 against Kentucky, and in the Elite 8 against Michigan, they started the game off so well and so strong and built double-digit leads in the first quarter. And I think when Texas can do that, it can get comfortable early. They just kind of put their foot on other teams' necks, and they really put them away, and they make it really, really hard to come back against because their defense is so good. So, like, when they can get out and transition early and force turnovers early and build that comfortable double-digit lead early on in the first 8 minutes of the game, they're going to be really hard to beat. And so that was kind of like the thing that I was looking at in this game and, the past couple games that Texas has had. If they get up big in the first quarter, they're hard to beat. And so that is going to be kind of the key to watch, I think, against UCLA is like, can the Bruins, avoid a slow start, which is what they did against Duke. They had a bad start and keep this thing competitive with Texas, early on. So they're in the game late to make plays.
Madison Booker looking every bit of a All-American, especially in that Elite 8 performance. That is this week's Starting 5. Let's get it to everyone's favorite segment on the Women's Basketball Podcast.
Pure beef.
It's time for the beef. I don't know if it's A1 Wagyu like it was last week when we had to maybe take a victory lap or two. We're not going to take a victory lap. We thought we may have another opportunity to celebrate a Mitch scoop, a mythical Mitch scoop, as our sometimes co-host Rebecca Kopelman likes to call it. We were half right, I would argue, on the South Florida situation and the Alabama situation. But tell us, Mitch, what's the very latest when it comes to the coaching carousel?
Yeah. Christy Curry. We were half right. She was talking to other teams, despite what she said before the NCAA tournament. It just turns out that team was not Northwestern, and it was the University of the South Florida Bulls.
Who also hired Chris Mack, by the way, away from Charleston. And so once again, I want to remind America.
Yeah.
I would tread lightly around Rob Higgins because I truly think he is coming. He also lured the director of communications from Ohio State over the weekend to join Brian Hartline in South Florida, in Tampa. So yeah, this guy is running a Power 4 program in the American Athletic Conference. People, look out.
This one was, went on the surface. It's like, why would Christy Curry leave Alabama for South Florida? I had a lot of people ask me that. The simplest way I can explain this is, do you want to be a small fish in the biggest pond, or do you want to be a big fish in a small pond? Do you want to have amongst the worst resources in the SEC, or do you want to have – now I'm talking about women's basketball specifically. We know what Alabama is in some other sports, especially football. We're getting there in men's basketball. We're getting there in some other sports. Women's basketball, it was amongst the worst in the SEC. Like bottom of the barrel, we're talking below $500,000 a year for rev share, which is going to be very hard to compete with in the SEC. But Christy Curry, I think, overachieved in that job in hindsight. Going to NCAA tournaments these past couple of years and, the whole thing. USF is pouring real resources into that women's basketball program. I think that, obviously Jose, Fernandez set the standard there with all that he did before he left for the Dallas Wings, kind of turning them into this mid-major powerhouse. And I think Rob Higgins wants to keep that going. He wants to make sure that this women's basketball team is operating at a high level. I was told that Christy Curry was not the only sitting Power 4 head coach that USF called, apparently. And they called some other big hitters here. And so, they end up with Christy Curry, and, I think this is going to kind of be her swan song job.
Glide path is our affectionate term, at least in my parents' household.
Yeah.
Not that she's slowing down. She's just,
no, yeah, she's approaching her 60s, and I think this is a good job though, and I think she was just a coach who was looking for, and you're seeing this calculus at a lot of different levels across the country. It's a big reason why Aaron Roussel is still at Richmond and not at an SEC school or a Big Ten school. Not that he hasn't taken those calls or interviewed for those jobs. But it's at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, what are you offering me? How are you supporting women's basketball in this era where we have rev share, we have NIL? To compete at the highest level, you need money, you need investment on several different levels. And if you're, why go be a bottom of the barrel team in the Big Ten or the ACC or the Big 12 when you're at a school, just using him as an example, in the A10 that gives a shit about women's basketball. So that's the big thing. I think that you're seeing in a lot of different, searches and openings and stuff across the board. If you're a fan of a Power 4 school and you are underwhelmed by your head coaching hire, there's a chance that it's because your school is not going to invest in women's basketball. Just to kind of quickly pivot off of that point, Northwestern, by the way, hired Carla Berube from Princeton.
What a turn. What a heel turn. It's a great hire.
Yeah. That is a hire that I think across the board, everybody was like, wow, she left for Northwestern. And because a lot of people thought she wasn't going to leave Princeton unless it was for a top tier primo job. And Northwestern is a rebuilding project. And I think that she left for Northwestern. What I was told is they're offering pretty competitive stuff in terms of resources and roster construction, close to $1 million a year for the roster construction stuff. So, Northwestern wants to be in the game. They want to be competitive. They want to compete women's basketball. Great. And they made a home run hire to get that done. I was surprised by that. I had heard Carla Berube's name involved and mentioned, but I was like, there's no way she leaves Princeton for Northwestern. Like, I just don't see that. She does though. And that's a big one. So, if you're surprised in a good way, it means that your school is kind of turning the corner in terms of its investment in women's basketball, like we talked about last week with the Florida Gators and Tammy Reese. Tammy Reese does not take that job if they're not actually investing.
Yes. Again, victory lap. In case you missed last week's episode, go back and listen. We also even made a separate little segment on the YouTube channel, OG Triangle Media, just for our discussion regarding friend of the program, Tammy Reese. I do want to quickly move to just the remaining openings, Mitch, because we are pressed for time. And I do want to make sure we do justice to this week's Final Four. But UCF opened up as we expected, could potentially happen with Johnny Dawkins of the men's team making the NCAA tournament. And then also the ongoing VCU saga, which may or may not be part of why we were a little late in hitting the record button this morning. So I'm excited to hear what you can share with us regarding those and some other still open positions.
Yeah, so UCF finally on Monday decided to pull the trigger and fire Satia Messer. To be quite honest, I have no idea why they waited this long to fire her. Because I've looked at her contract, and the way her contract is constructed, there's not like a dramatic drop off when you get to a certain date. Like some contracts is like, oh, the buyout drops by $400,000 on April 1st, whatever. It's not set up that way. It's always been 50% of whatever her remaining deal is. And so maybe they've saved like 10 or 20 grand by waiting 4 weeks. And now you're putting whoever your next hire is kind of behind the eight ball a little bit, because the transfer portal is going to open up next Monday. And so I think that's going to be a little bit tricky, but UCF did pull the trigger. I think the three names to watch here are far and away Gabe Lazo, who is the former Tennessee assistant who resigned last week. I would keep an eye on him, not only because of, his resume as a recruiter and an assistant coach in the SEC, but also somebody who has deep ties to Florida. He is Cuban. He is from Miami. He played at FIU. He knows that state really well and is a really good recruiter. And I think he's going to be in the mix there. I would also keep an eye on Des Rogers, who is the head coach at Arkansas State, took them to the NCAA tournament last year. Pretty young coach. She's in her early 30s. I think she's around, you and I's age. Mm-hmm. Took them to the NCAA tournament last year. I believe this season they won like 27 games, which was like the second most in program history. And so the thing to watch here, the connection is that UCF's athletic director used to be at Arkansas State. And a lot of times athletic directors hire who they know. And so that is someone to keep an eye on. And I would also keep an eye on Vanessa Blair-Lewis at George Mason, who interviewed for the Florida job, did not get it. I still think she would do well in a Power 4 job in the state of Florida, given her coaching acumen, given she's won everywhere she's been, given she, used to coach in the state of Florida. I will also say real quick, producer Dimitri is not here, but the Alabama search, we talked about investment. We talked about what kind of pools you're swimming in. Alabama is swimming in a smaller pond than Florida was. So
which already we thought was a pretty small pond. We thought Florida was swimming in a lake.
Yeah.
And Alabama's in a retention pond.
Yes. Now that doesn't mean that they can't get a good candidate, because they have talked to Des Rogers, and they have talked to Aya Gazzardo from McNeese State. And I have reason to believe that they have also had a courtesy conversation with Adia Barnes. Now, I don't think that is going to happen, because Adia's buyout is very, very big because she just got to SMU. But
SMU Alabama has money, for those of you who don't know. That oil money flows in the state of Texas. I
think that was just Greg Byrne hired her at Arizona. And I think that was just hey, how you doing? Let's catch up. Let's talk. Hey, you want to try
Who
to
do
do
you
this or
think?
not?
As I'm
Yeah,
gauging this,
I
maybe
think
you've got some suggestions.
I think that's what that conversation was about. So Alabama might still get a good hire, but we'll see. And yeah, then quickly the just the dumbest head coaching search this cycle has been VCU, which by the way has been open since early February when they decided to fire Bethel Boyle. So for about a week. The two names that I kept consistently hearing, these are the finalists here. It's going to be one of these two coaches, was Rice's Lindsey Edmonds and Vermont's Alyssa Craigsay. And then all of a sudden, like last Thursday, somewhere in that ballpark, I was told, yeah, those coaches are out of the search. And I was like, okay. It sounded like the coaches pulled out and not VCU was going to go in a different direction kind of thing. I heard they kicked the tires on Sean O'Regan at James Madison. I was told that Marshall's Julie Falks had kind of emerged as somebody in the search. And then this morning, the first thing I see, not long after I wake up is I get a text message and somebody sent me Skim Milky's tweet saying that the hire is going to be Chelsea Banbury from High Point. I feel like I've been pretty plugged into like what's going on with the search. Had not heard her name involved in the search before today. And so VCU is taking this year's annual Auburn Messy Coaching Search Award.
The Trent Baalke Memorial Coaching Search Award, given that I've been a part of one or two or three absurd Jaguars head coaching searches in my time here in Jacksonville. Great stuff, Mitch. And of course, you can follow Mitch's work, USA Today, for all the very latest when it comes to the coaching carousel. And you can also follow Mitch in Phoenix this week at the Final for our final installment of the college season in terms of making money with Mitch. He is 28-19 on the season, went 1-2 last week in the second round of the tournament, thanks to Duke's impressive last second win over LSU. Mitch avoids an 0-3 week because Kentucky and Vandy let us down. Lay it on us, Mitch. This is going to also serve as our pseudo preview for those two Final Four matchups, the National Semifinals. And yes, we'll talk about the third event going on Friday as well coming up. But first, UConn, South Carolina. You already said you're rolling with the Gamecocks, and then UCLA, Texas, perhaps a surprising line right now at DraftKings.
Yes. So I'm going to take South Carolina to cover 6.5 points. They're 6.5 point underdogs. I will take the plus money there for them to cover 6.5. I think South Carolina is going to give UConn their toughest game of the season, and we'll see what happens. I think that Dawn is obviously one of the best coaches in the country. I think she's got a team that matches up well with UConn. In terms of you have a lockdown defender in Raven Johnson, who is versatile and I think who is capable of guarding both Sarah Strong and AZ Fudd on any given possession. And you have a 6'6" center in Medina Okot. You have a real good shooter in Tessa Johnson. I think they've got the pieces there. And so we'll see what happens, but I'm going to take the Gamecocks plus 6.5.
I do want to note when you look at, and look, I know that this TCU Elite Eight game was kind of an outlier for a lot of players. Tania Latson was averaging close to 20 points per game in the tournament so far. She's 1 of 5 from the floor, finished with 3 total points. And then you look at, again, the emergence of Agat McKeer, 18 points, a career high. She was absolutely balling, 8 of 14 from the floor. You felt her presence in that third quarter when momentum swung to the Gamecocks in particular. And Dawn regards her as truly, in terms of ceiling, one of the highest ceiling players on the South Carolina roster. And so I think if you can get Tania Latson back to the form that we saw in the first 3 games of the tournament from South Carolina, and then if this is the same McKeer that you got on Monday night, if you got a got,
I've
been waiting. I've been trying to say this, but yeah, if you get the same Gotti that you got on Monday night, like, good luck, UConn. Just because this has always been, and we talked about this after the SEC tournament, this has always been the bugaboo with the roster construction for the South Carolina team. Could they go deeper than their starting 5 or 6 players? And not only was it a resounding yes, even after losing to Texas in the SEC tournament final, it's a resounding yes after this win over TCU, in which Dawn Staley rotated in 10 different players. And look, I know our friend Alicia T out of Europe is never going to be in year one what I think a lot of South Carolina fans hoped the midseason acquisition would be. But if you get Gotti playing at this level, and if you get some solid minutes from Maddie McDaniel like they are, hey, you know what? Maybe we're cooking with something here. Maybe we got something here.
I mean, Miriam Dowda, 2 points, 4 rebounds.
You'll take that
good.
in 11 minutes.
And I mean, even Turnabees, 2 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist.
That's Alicia
in
T,
9
by
minutes.
the way, friends.
Yeah, Turnabees in the trap.
I want to call her Alicia T forever. I like the move. I do think that UConn, in terms of sheer power, like I'm not going to bet against them. So I will go the other way. I will go with the Huskies. And it's just because I do think that they have shown a thing or two when it comes to their depth, that this is more than just the AZ Fudd and Sarah Strong show, because ultimately, I don't want to say AZ Fudd was a no-show in the Elite Eight game against Notre Dame, but ultimately, I mean, she finishes with 13 points. She was 5 of 12 from the floor. And there were questions in the first half of what is she even doing out there? And so that's where I just look at this and I say, okay, if you're UConn, if you can have certainly Quinones doing what she did was massive in this game, to drop 20 in a game in which AZ Fudd only has 13. But ultimately, I also think that Kaylee Heichel has taken the next step. I think that they've seen more from Sarah Williams, which has been huge, at the very least on the defensive end of the floor. Ashlyn Shade, I know the box score doesn't really show it, but I think you're starting to see those role players actually step up, not to the extent of Neepkins and Ledger Walker at UCLA, but at the very least, this is not a two-headed monster and no one is behind them.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. This is going to be a good game, I think. I think the other game's going to be good too. This is 9:30 p.m. Eastern on Friday night, late game. Texas, UCLA. Texas is the favorite right now, -1.5. I think maybe, despite UCLA being the higher seed here, I think maybe the sports books are influenced by the fact that Texas beat UCLA earlier this season. Like we mentioned, neutral court, Las Vegas, November, Texas won that matchup. This is a really tough one. I like UCLA to win this game
outright.
I like them to win outright. They're 1.5 point dogs, so I'll just take them to cover 1.5. But
so it is basically a pick 'em then.
Pretty much. We're pretty close to it. I like UCLA to win this. I think they're going to be motivated. I think, they're going to analyze some things that went wrong against Texas, some things that went wrong against Duke. And maybe the Duke game was kind of the shock them back to life game and kind of get right a little bit. I will say, again, if this goes Texas's way early, if they jump out to a 22-9 lead in the first quarter, it's a wrap. I think it's just a wrap. If Texas gets comfortable early, it's a wrap.
File that one away, put it on the board. Also would think the sports books were influenced, Mitch, by the fact that Texas's Texas's Elite Eight win over Michigan was the third largest margin of victory in Elite Eight history. And so I also think it's not just looking back at that November matchup, but it's also some recency bias. Let's look back, though, at that matchup back in November in the Players Era Championship. Final score, Texas 76, UCLA 65. Corey Close only deployed a 6-man rotation in that game. And while largely it's been a 6 or 7, LOL 6-7 player rotation with the addition of Sienna Betts, who was injured back in November. And so the true freshman did not play. That's why I look at this and it's not super jarring when you consider the fact that they've been rolling with 7 for most of the season. But ultimately, that's another game where you're going to have to get more than 8 points out of Lauren Betts like they did. She shot 50% from the floor in that game, but Texas really was able to impose the length and size that caused Michigan to have fits on Monday night, and they were able to do that against the large, the player who defines the earth theory in women's college basketball in 2025, 2026, and Lauren Betts at 6'7". I do think that if our friend Gianna Neepkins is able to get it going from deep late, I think if Gabriela Jaquez can also join the 3-point party, that's maybe where if you can, let's say Betts only has somewhere between 10 and 20 points. if you can ensure that you're knocking down threes, I think that'll make up for that lack of production, because Texas is going to crowd the paint and try to stop Lauren Betts. I would think, because I don't think that this is going to be a UConn, Dan Hurley, Luke Murray situation where they went against Zach Edey in the national title game and self-admitted they were like, you know what, we're just going to let Zach Edey get his and we're just going to stop everybody else. I do not think that's going to be Vic Schaefer's approach, but maybe it is.
Yeah.
So maybe it is. So but we're looking forward to it. You will be boots on the ground. And again, Mitch is rolling with both of the underdogs as of this writing, Tuesday, March 31st, prior to noon Eastern time, in which South Carolina and UCLA are the underdogs. He has South Carolina covering, UCLA outright defeating the Texas Longhorns. Let's keep it moving, because Mitch, that's not the only thing going on Friday. What if I told you we're going to start with that? We're going to start chronologically. We're going to start with the expansion draft. So for those of you keeping score on ESPN, shout out to the other employer, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Friday, you will have the expansion draft for the Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo. 7 o'clock, semifinal number 1 between UConn and South Carolina. Semifinal number 2 at 9:30 between Texas and UCLA. So let's start with that. The Fire will pick first in the expansion draft, then the Tempo. Because of the coin flip that was held last week, the Tempo will pick 6th in the traditional college draft. The Fire will pick 7th. Anything that you think our audience should know in this, not a main event, but just to mention kind of subsection in terms of WNBA calendar planning for the next week, Mitch?
So the expansion draft is at 3:30 p.m. Eastern.
Right. So it will be 12:30 your time when you're out in.
Okay. So it's 3.5 hours before. So I got my local Phoenix time confused and my Eastern time confused, because in local Phoenix time, the first game on Friday starts at 4 p.m. So I was like, 30 minutes for the expansion draft. I just, it's going to be a busy Friday. It's going to be a double Celsius day for me. We'll see. I don't know.
I don't really have a ton of thoughts. Like our friend Rebecca Kopelman sent me a couple of mock drafts of who could be protected, who's not.
Right.
But ultimately, I don't even want to speculate on that, because with so many players, because of the CBA negotiations and are pending free agents, and free agency won't start until after the expansion draft. I don't even want to speculate on who teams are going to protect and who they're not, because I ultimately don't know who they can and who they can't protect under this new agreement.
I think it's over at Sportico. They have this expansion draft mock simulator thing you can kind of play with, cool. where you can kind of choose who you want to protect and stuff like that. I will say, I think one of the teams to watch in terms of players taken away from them in the expansion draft is the Atlanta Dream, because they have a couple restricted free agents that they need to protect, like Ryan Howard and Naz Homan. And there's a chance that they leave someone like Brittany Griner unprotected.
Whoa.
I
was thinking Kate Martin was going to be the biggest name that potentially could be left unprotected.
I mean, that's a possibility. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's a scenario. So I would keep an eye on the Dream and kind of what happens with them and stuff. But yeah, I'm excited. Expansion drafts are fun. We'll see what happens.
One other note from the W, the Connecticut Sun will be moving back to Houston, where they will resume play as the Houston Comets. The Ferritta family bought the team for $300 million. They will begin play in Houston in 2027. Mitch, I'm going to defer to a lot of our contemporaries here on the women's basketball beat, who especially, Brendan Glasheen, Tarika, the crew that is a part of the broadcast team for the Connecticut Sun out of Mohegan Sun Arena. No, she did a podcast last week with Tamika Catchings about the state of what the Sun where they go from here. I know it's disappointing. Gino Auriemma spoke on the record about it, but this is the way of the world. And while, yes, they won't be owned by the same group, correct me if I'm wrong, that owns the Houston Rockets, they will share a practice facility. And
no, it's the same group.
Oh, it is the same group. Okay, so there it is. We're laying it out even more. Yeah, it's even more specific then. It's even more of an easier point A to point B, connecting the dots. And this is just the way of the world that we live in. And I know it's disappointing for Connecticut, which prides itself as the basketball capital of the world. But at the same time, this is how business works. And this is capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, so this is basically the third different party that the Connecticut Sun have attempted to be sold to. They had a flirtation with the minority owner of the Celtics, and then Mark Lazary of the Milwaukee Bucks, which that would have been a purchase that would have kept them in the state of Connecticut, I believe. I think he just wanted to move them to Hartford. And so based on what I read, reports from the Athletic and some other places, those purchases were not approved by the WNBA simply because those parties had not submitted expansion bids, and the WNBA kind of wanted to control the process, I guess, some there, and only wanted teams to be sold to cities or parties who had submitted expansion bids previously. I'm not really sure why that is, to be quite honest with you, other than the WNBA just doing a power play there and, basically trying to control the process a little bit. But yeah, so they're going to get sold to Tillman Fertitta, Texas-based billionaire who is also currently the U.S. ambassador to Italy, and also owns the NBA's Rockets. And so yeah, the team is going to play in Connecticut this season, and then 2027, the Comets are back. Winner, basically our first and maybe only, I guess you can make an argument for the Aces, dynasty in WNBA history. They won each of the 4 first league championships from 1997 to 2000. So, that'll be something to watch for sure.
We will keep tabs on it. And also we are thinking of everyone who is involved with the Connecticut Sun, since obviously this does impact people's livelihood and potentially having to relocate themselves from the Northeast to Houston, Texas. Let's get to last call before we get out of here. Staying in the W, Mitch, the Wings have finalized their staff. We are no skim mulkey. We do not have a Discord chat. Maybe at some point we will. But at this writing, we don't. But we've dropped some breadcrumbs that we heard some things about that Dallas Wings coaching staff and who may or may not be on it, and now it's official.
Yeah, Mike Neighbors heading to Dallas to join Jose Fernandez there. It was just kind of funny because I had kept that one pretty close, and I had seen some coaching hot boards for some jobs and Mike being mentioned on there, and I was like, he's got a job. He's good. So
he has a job, and also he's busy tracking his new Saber metrics.
That's right. His notebook.
That's his other job.
Yeah, his notebook tweets are great. I love that. Mostly I just like seeing his rankings of movies and stuff. I just go to the bottom of the list first and see what movies and shows he's talking about, and then I kind of go back up and see what the bigger messages or whatever. But Jose Fernandez putting his staff together. Also, I mean, there's a lot of college people on the staff. He pulled some people from USF that he worked with, pulled some people from Louisville. Jose Fernandez, really connected guy, president of the WBCA. Solid staff, I think. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. And, Neighbors, he was an assistant in the W last year with the LA Sparks. So, I think this is a move that makes sense for him and makes sense for Jose.
We already hinted at these next two, but the 2 schools that have been ravaged by the transfer portal prior to it opening the most, Iowa State and Oklahoma State. The Cyclones have 9 players in the portal. None of them are named Audie Crooks, though, officially. Yeah. That's what makes this even more interesting. Bill Fenley and Jamie Pollard, the athletic director at Iowa State, declined a statement to Tommy Birch of the Des Moines Register regarding the state of the roster. So file that one away, folks, while Audie Crooks probably continues to deliberate whether or not she will be leaving Ames, Iowa. And then we alluded to it, Lena Girardi amongst the, I believe it's 7 names that will be departing Stillwater as well. I read that one, Mitch, and again, I don't have any, even despite my Iowa ties, I don't have any insight in terms of what's going on behind the scenes in Ames. And I definitely don't know what's going on in Stillwater. I read that one more as okay, this is where there may be some tampering. Those girls recognize, hey, we made the tournament. We're getting a bag. We're on the move. And that's nothing against them and their families. Hey, listen, I respect it's a free economy. But I look at the Iowa State situation as a bit more precarious, given the way their season ended. Mm-hmm. And especially without any official word from Audie Crooks, but the fact that she left the door open that she too could be on her way out. Oklahoma State, I think it's just the world we live in.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Iowa State in particular is wildly interesting to me. Because, before Jada Williams and Addie Brown went into the portal, I think, you mentioned the Des Moines Register, Audie Crooks gave them a statement that said that she was undecided about entering the transfer portal. And now all of her teammates are gone, essentially.
But she's still there.
Just about. So I'm curious to see what is happening there, what is going to happen there. I think Oklahoma State, I think that's probably the right read on that. Like they still have Staley Hurd, like they still have their bus driver. They still have like a couple other really good players there. They are losing Akol Akot, who came to them from UCF and was really good for them this year. They're also going to lose Jaden Wooten, Amari Whiting, and Lena Girardi. So they are losing some significant pieces and some really good shooters. But I think that is more of like, this is the times that we live in. Maybe Oklahoma State does not have a ton of money for women's basketball, and maybe maybe there was some back channeling and tampering going on here, and that happens everywhere across the board. Where hey, go get your money, go chase the bag. If that's if that's what you want to do, I'm not gonna knock anybody for chasing the bag.
That's all I've got, Mitch. Do you have anything else before we get out of here outside of your itinerary and your plans this week ahead in terms of where we can find your coverage?
I don't really have anything else at the moment. I did publish a column this morning at USA Today about, hey, why are the same teams in the Final Four? The answer is money. I think if you go look at, I actually used Matt Brown's Extra Points newsletter. He got all the operating budgets for fiscal year 2025. And, shocker, all 4 Final Four teams in the top 6 of spending. I think Krista Gerlich talked about this. I think Kenny Brooks talked about this. If you want to compete at the highest level in women's basketball, like every other sport in college athletics, you got to spend money. And this is a spend money to win kind of business now. So, I would, go check that out. That's what I got over there at USA Today this morning. Last Friday, I was on Due South, North Carolina Public Radio, and talked about Will Wade and Hubert Davis. And so that was a lot of fun. So
wow, it took an hour and 11 minutes to get to the drama in the triangle, which, hey, if you want more, folks, this is in the same feed as OG Triangle Media, Ovius and Gilio, top 100 most popular podcasts in the country this week because of all the chaos. All the chaos.
I mostly just borrowed, Ovius and Gilio's talking points about, nothing in the triangle happens in a vacuum. And also, Will Wade is a wankster. And that's what we'll say.
History doesn't repeat itself. It often rhymes. However, It does repeat itself when it comes to women's basketball. The same 4 teams in the Final Four. Mitch will be in Phoenix, Arizona for this year's installment, and we look forward to joining you next week to recap all of it, look ahead to the WNBA, traditional college draft, and much, much more. And so, until next week, he's Mitch, I'm Mia, saying we'll catch you next week.
Deuces.